On this episode, we chat with Phra Pandit on the Buddhist concepts of heaven and hell.
So if you want to find out how the concept of an afterlife applies to a religion that believes in reincarnation or rebirth, you'll get a lot from this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Well, sawadee krap there, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001, but got lost in Chinatown and ended up living in a box behind a temple, which is where I'm recording this right now.
Dude, I've been trying not to let on or tell anyone about that.
Well, it's got to come out sometime.
All right. And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 20 years ago. Fell in love with explaining the meaning of the expression coup d'etat. So I never left.
It's funny, hey, how you learn, you learn the word nam tuam, flood, when there's a flood in Bangkok, and you learn the word, all these disasters.
So we asked them what, the word for flood is, and then they ask us, what's this word coup? Coup d'etat, what is that?
Coup, it's a coup.
It's a coup, right. We want to say a quick thank you to one of our patrons, Grant McKay, who supports us at the show shout-out level. Stick around after our interviews with our most returningest guest, Phra Pandit, to hear why Thai culture gave Grant a reality smackdown on his own self-worth.
Ooh.
And a huge thank you to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a whole bunch of cool stuff, including our ad-free regular show a day early, behind-the-scenes photos and videos of our interviews, discounts on swag, which you can find on our website, and various other things that aren't available to regular listeners. But best of all, patrons like Grant also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and random topics. We just finished recording this week's bonus show, and we chatted about the death of one of my lifetime heroes, a huge pipeline explosion in Samut Prakan, south of Bangkok, the ongoing protests, and finally, some tourists who came into Thailand on the STV visa. To become a patron, head to bangkokpodcast.com/support.
All right, finally, here on the ST visa. I refuse, Ed. I refuse. I'm taking a stand. I'm not going to call it the STV visa. I'm going to call it the ST visa because V stands for visa.
Damn, you're a man of high standards.
That's right. This is my line in the sand. I'm going to die on this hill.
You're principled. You're a man of principle.
That's right. That's right. Unless you want to pay me, then I'll be a man of your principle. All right. Well, before we jump into it, don't forget to send us a voicemail on the Line app. If you want to say hi, tell us a story, or give us some feedback. We love hearing from you guys, and we might play your message on a show, for instance, like we will on this show. So add us to your friend list and send them in. All right. Well, before we forget, last week I said that the contest for the book that one of our listeners, Kyle Sakowitz, wrote called Thaiberg, about his time in Thailand, would close this week, but I didn't take into account that not everyone listens to the show on the day it comes out, like superfans. So we're extending the contest by another week. So if you live in the US and have a Kindle, drop us an email at bangkokpodcast@gmail.com with the title book, and we'll put your name in the running and announce the winners soon. All right. Well, in this episode, we welcome back our old friend, Phra Pandit, who has been living in Thailand as a monk for the past 20 odd years. Now, for me, being indoctrinated with the Bible and all its fun regulatory principles when I was a kid, I am very familiar with the concept of heaven and hell, but I wanted to know more about the concept of heaven and hell in Buddhism. After all, if Buddhists believe that they will be reincarnated, is there even a need for heaven and hell? So I went right to the source. Well, not right to the source. I went to Phra Pandit because he's as close to
You didn't go to the actual Buddha for this information?
I don't know him as well as I know Phra Pandit. So I went to him instead, and we had a really cool conversation. So here I am talking to Phra Pandit on the Buddhist concepts of heaven and hell. All right, well, we are back with our most returningest guest ever. That is a true statistic. You have been on the show more than any other person besides the hosts. So I'll give you a medal for that.
Cool.
We're back here with our friend Phra Pandit.
I'll take lunch rather than a medal.
All right. Well, I'll buy you lunch. How's that? Wait, I just did buy you lunch. You're not getting 2 free lunches. Phra Pandit, welcome again. It's great to have you on. It's always fun to hang out with you. And I wanted to have you on this show to talk about something that I have been pondering for a while. And I've decided to call this podcast, as we record it, it might change by the time we post it, but it was going to be called something along the lines of Heaven, Hell, and Reincarnation.
Okay.
And I want to talk about these concepts and how Buddhism defines them and looks at them. But first of all, can you just give me a brief rundown of reincarnation? I think I know what it means, but can you maybe tell me what it means just so I'm on the right track?
Yeah, reincarnation means that the life force or a soul, if you like, passes on from one lifetime to another lifetime. There's a slight distinction between reincarnation and rebirth. And technically, Buddhism has the principle of rebirth, which is slightly different. In reincarnation, there's like a steady, constant soul that is reborn. Something like you will wear different clothes every day, but it's still the same person. You just change your clothes. In the same way, there's a constant soul, but in each lifetime, it will change the body.
Okay.
And that's reincarnation. Rebirth is more like one candle lighting another candle, lighting another candle. There is nothing that actually passes on from one life to another. There is no constant soul, but there is a constantly changing stream of karma, if you want to put it like that. This is a slight distinction, but yes, slight difference between reincarnation and rebirth.
Okay. And in Theravada Buddhism, which is predominant in Thailand,
So Buddhism taught rebirth, that there is a continuation from one lifetime to another lifetime, but not necessarily that there is a soul of any kind that actually passes on. In the same way as like the 6-year-old Greg, who I just found out punched his sister in the stomach.
Thanks for that. I was a jerk as a kid. What can I say?
Now, what is that the same Greg then as you are now? What the actual atoms in your body, probably only your teeth. Some parts of your teeth, your adult teeth probably stay the same atom throughout your lifetime, but the rest of you has changed several times. All the cells have died and been replaced. So there isn't necessarily something that has continued from 6-year-old Greg to, are you 40?
Let's say 40, yeah.
But there has been a continuation. So Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism has that viewpoint that there is a continuation.
Okay.
The important point in Buddhism, what is called right view. And in right view, one part of right view is that there are Brahmins and recluses that have seen directly with independent knowledge the arising and passing away of beings and the memory of one lifetime to another lifetime. And this is key in Buddhism, that it is one of the attainments that a person can make to be able to remember their previous lifetimes.
Okay.
And the actual sutta goes like this. And so he applies his mind to the memory of past lives. Here I was born in this life. I had this trade. I had this lifespan. I was this well or sickly. I did this for a living. I wore these kind of clothes. And this one I find interesting. I ate this kind of food. So
you remember that.
One of the memories you get is like, oh yeah, I was born as a Thai person 5 lifetimes ago and I ate guitio. So it's highly specific, and people like to say that heaven and hell and rebirth is allegorical or metaphoric, that we just get reborn from one moment to another moment, that there is no real rebirth. Whether there is rebirth or not, I can't say. But Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism, in fact, all kinds of Buddhism, explicitly state that a person does get born from one lifetime to another lifetime to another lifetime. That's what the text actually says.
Every person? Or
every being.
Every being.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is no extinguishing of life.
Just like energy, I guess, right? You can't destroy or create energy. It can only change forms. So then what, I mean, I know that in my limited understanding anyway, that Buddhism has the concept of heaven and hell. There's that famous temple, I forget where it is, but it's in Thailand somewhere, where it's got all these gruesome statues of what happens to you if you do these terrible things. Like if you get an abortion, this will happen to you. If you sin, this will happen to you. If you gamble, it's people getting their tongues ripped out and
If you lie on a podcast, then
you punch your sister in the stomach or something like that. But
I know this Thai lady, and she was terrified of snakes. Absolutely terrified.
Yeah.
But when she was a kid, she's a very, very super rich woman, a palace full of servants. And when she was a kid, they'd actually caught a snake, and she'd had her servants hold the snake. She sewed the snake's mouth shut.
Damn.
With a needle and thread. And now her karma is that she's petrified of snakes. So,
okay. Well, maybe because I hit my sister, I'm going to come back in the next life as like a terrible boxer or something like that who gets beaten every
okay,
day.
that's different. That's karma. So karma is another issue. The first issue is whether there is rebirth or not. And of course, you can speculate. A lot of people really like Buddhism, but they hate the idea that there is a teaching of rebirth. Whether you believe in rebirth, whether you remembered rebirths or experienced them, which you can do through past life regressions and things these days, which may or may not be true or real. It's up to you to think about. But what is factual is that Buddhism does teach that. So that's true. That we can state categorically as being true. So rebirth, then the second question is the heavens and hells, where you get reborn. And then the third issue is karma, which is what governs your rebirth.
Fair enough. So a lot of Westerners then think of the concept of rebirth as you come back to Earth, but that seems to me that might be kind of a limited interpretation of it. It's possible to be reborn in hell, and that's necessitates the existence of a hell.
Absolutely. There is no, proper mainstream religion anywhere that teaches that you only get reborn back on the planet Earth. There may be some new age people that kind of have invented that. I don't know. But yes, every proper spiritual teaching that has reincarnation also has levels of heavens and hells. So you can get reborn as an animal in the hell realms, in the heavenly realms, higher heavenly realms. There's, in Buddhism, I think 32 layers from top to bottom.
From hell all the way up to heaven?
Yeah. And not just hell, there are different kinds of hell. There are certain really bad hells for...
Hell's hell.
Yeah, people that say nasty things on Twitter. There's a special hell for them. And there's special heavenly realms. I mean, yeah.
People who walk on the left on escalators and stand on the right. Things
yes,
like that.
Definitely
the top level.
For
so then,
heavenly nectar.
Okay, so that's interesting. So the reason heaven and hell exists is so that you can be reborn in the appropriate place. But is being reborn into heaven, is that enlightenment?
No.
What's the difference?
Well, technically enlightenment, you get out of the entire system, so there is no more rebirth. Which is why Nietzsche was so thrilled with Buddhism, because he thought, yes, this is the ultimate suicide. This is the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate transcendence. And he loved this idea of total annihilation as a spiritual goal. He thought this was wonderful. But of course, Buddhism doesn't say that at all. The enlightenment, you simply don't get reborn in heavens and hells. What is remaining, that's a different question. That's about the nature of a arahant or enlightened person, but it's too far to go into today.
All right. Well, there's a conflict here then that I'm struggling with. If I die and I have to be reborn,
you will die.
Well, we're not sure yet. I don't believe anything until it happens. Let's see how it goes. There might be some major scientific advancement in the next 30 or so years. You never know.
Spike Milligan said that he wanted written on his gravestone, "Boy, was he old."
Another good one is, "I told you I was sick."
Yes.
Well,
here lies all that could die of Lady Sale.
I don't know that one.
She's a woman, but there's a line. Here lies all that could die of Greg.
That's good. I might use that one. So when I die, / if I die, what judges where I'm going to be reborn? Because Buddhism, for Westerners anyway, famously has no deity, no God. But if someone or something or some power is deciding where you will be reborn, wouldn't that be considered a type of God?
First of all, Buddhism has millions of gods. The heavenly realms are inhabited by gods.
But not a God,
not a creator God.
Okay, I see.
Although there's a very good argument to say that Buddhadasa, one of the famous Thai scholars, he made arguments that actually Buddhism does contain the idea of a transcendent God in one of his books, and he compares God to Dharma. So there are arguments about this. There doesn't need to be somebody who decides. You get sick, you get cancer, you get a bad knee, who decides that you get sick? Nothing decides. It's just nature. Who decides that an apple fell from the tree? Well, there's just nature decided. That's just the operation of the physical world. There doesn't need to be a person who decides. One of the stories it goes like this, that if you take a pot full of rocks and throw it into a pond, and the pot hits the bottom of the pond and breaks, where do the rocks go?
They fall to the bottom of the pond.
They stay on the bottom of the pond.
Yeah.
If you take a pot full of ghee, butter, and throw it into the pond, and it sinks to the bottom and the pot cracks, where does the ghee go?
It floats to the top.
Who makes it float to the top?
Isaac Newton and his principles.
Exactly. So this was an analogy given by the Buddha himself.
Okay.
He said that after you die, the breaking of the pot, you float to your natural level.
Ooh, that's deep.
There is nobody that decides. I should say that was in Theravada original Buddhism, but later stories came up, and there was a story. Those who know me know how much I love stories. There's a story of King Yama, and he's actually a deity who decides which karmas or which actions that you've done in the past will determine your next life. Now, he's not really part of the original Buddhism, although his name is mentioned. This role isn't particularly mentioned. But a lot of Buddhism was transmitted through art. And a vague concept or abstract concept like rebirth is hard to paint. But you can paint King Yama judging people and deciding where they get reborn. So there was a couple of years ago, I went to one of these hell gardens with Jack Whitehall. I got very famous, by the way, and Greg here was the one that hooked me up with to do this show.
Still haven't got my finder's fee. This was Jack Whitehall's Netflix special where he traveled around the world with his dad.
Yeah. And he's a pretty famous and very good comedian in Britain. And so I jumped at the chance to do this show with him, which you can find on Netflix.
I have to let listeners, if you haven't seen the show Jack Whitehall on Netflix, and I laughed out loud at one part on that because when you first met him, he said, yes, nice to meet you. And of course, he didn't know whether to shake your hand or give you a hug or give you a Y or something. And he said, am I allowed to touch you? And you said, do you want to touch me?
Yeah.
It's like, well, no, but it was so funny. It's such a perfect response.
Yeah, it was the only one of my jokes that they kept in. They didn't want to be, he didn't want to be upstaged by my humor. But I found out afterwards, if you watch the show, on the van, on the way to meeting me at the Hell Garden, Jack Whitehall had actually asked the guide whether the monk that he's about to meet is one of these Zen samurai monks who you can kick in the bollocks.
What?
And they don't feel it.
Oh, God.
So I think that she had told him, you're not allowed to touch monks. So she saved me from a kick in the bollocks.
Well.
Anyway, yeah, so we shot the scene a couple of times. He says, no, I've been told I can't touch you. Is that true? I'm like, well, do you want to touch me?
Whatever you do, don't kick me in the nads.
Anyway, so when we were looking around the Hell Garden, there is a statue of King Yama. And he has two lieutenants, two secretaries, sat in front of him with transcripts. This is how it's presented in art and statues.
Okay.
And these two servants or secretaries, they record all your good and bad deeds, a bit like Father Christmas.
Okay. Yeah.
So that when you go, after you die and you see King Yama, he will decide, judging from the transcripts of these two guys, from the good and the bad deeds that you've done. Now, what I said to Jack and his father, I gave them a joke. I said, I'll tell you this story. Here are these two guys who record all your good and bad deeds through your life. And you say, yes, I have a wife that does that.
Okay.
But they didn't take my joke. I gave them this joke free of charge.
That's a pretty rough joke.
So, in Buddhist art, King Yama decides, but in Buddhist philosophy, there's no need for a decider. You simply go to your natural level according to your karma.
So then would it be right to say that right now I am in my natural level from whatever previous life I had lived?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a bummer.
Some karma, the way karma works is very tricky, but sometimes you can make a karma, but it doesn't manifest for several lifetimes.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Karmas that will manifest quickly or will certainly manifest in your next rebirth, or if you've killed your parents, if you shed the blood of an arahant, and a few other really bad things like this.
An arahant
is an enlightened being.
Okay.
And a few other things. If you commit these, then you're going to go down to a nasty hell. And there are several good ones. If you've practiced concentration meditation, if you've made offerings, food offerings to an arahant, this kind of thing, then you'll be bumped up to a higher realm. Other karmas might not affect where you're reborn, but they may affect your state of rebirth. So if you torment creatures in your lifetime, in your next lifetime, you'll be sickly. If you take the life of creatures in this lifetime, your next lifetime, you will have a short life. This one I found interesting. If you're a good listener in this lifetime, in your next lifetime, you will be a leader.
Really?
And so on and so forth for things like whether you're beautiful to look at, different things like this. There's a kind of formulas that are given. So certain behaviors have certain effects.
Interesting. It's a little bit unfair. I don't have any control over what I look like.
Yeah, the whole karma is not fair. It's the Buddha said you want to get out of this system.
You sound like my mom when I was a kid and I said, this isn't fair. She said, life isn't fair. Maybe she was Buddhist.
There's a really interesting discussion between the concepts of forgiveness and karma. And Christianity tends to focus on forgiveness, which Buddhism also has.
Right, yeah.
But the idea is whatever you've done, it gets forgiven, whereas karma is out to get you. So what we usually say is, I want forgiveness for me and karma for my enemies.
That's really good. Well, then let's talk about angels then. I forget the Thai word for angel. It is
deva. It's where we get the word devil from, but the meaning got changed. But deva.
Deva. Okay. So what are Thai angels? Because you see them when you go to a temple. A lot of temples have these beautiful murals on the wall, and some of them have angels.
Okay. Well, we can do the whole cosmology very briefly. There's the lowest of the low hell realms, where you're going to be in there for an eon with immense suffering. Then there are other like cold hell realms and hot hell realms. Then you have like a hungry ghost realm, which is people who are greedy and they get reborn as these ghosts with very thin necks and they're not able to consume anything.
Right.
So they're tormented by the greed, but it's not the depths of hell. So there are layers and levels of the hell realms. Then there's the animal realms, getting reborn, everything from an insect to a dolphin. Then there's the human realm. And again, there are levels. You can be born in a depraved and unhappy state or a very elevated and lucky state. Then there are the desire heavenly realms, which means if you do good deeds, you can get reborn into the next, I think, 6 levels of heavenly realm. As you go up through these heavenly realms, you get more and more refined. Your lifespan is longer and longer. Your brightness and your purity is higher and higher. Then you hit like a limit. And the only way to get any higher than that is to refine the mind through meditation. If you make the mind very refined in meditation, you can attain to the next 2 levels of the universe. Above the heavenly realms are what are called form realms, and then formless realms. So they get more and more abstract. You get more and more kind of diffuse in a way, more and more pure, longer and longer lifespans. The point of Buddhism is no matter how far you get, no matter how far you purify, you will still always die from that realm and be reborn back in another realm afterwards. Okay. So the devas are simply beings in those higher realms. They're going to die from those realms and get reborn in lower or higher realms afterwards. So they're not, it's different to a Christian concept of an angel, which is always an angel.
Right.
Right. We have been angels. We will be angels. We will go to hell realms. And there's some discussion of whether you can actually fall down or how far you can go up. But yeah, we all have the right to be devas. And the devas in the different realms have different levels of purity. So the devas in realms closest to the human might still be quite nasty creatures. They may still be, have very bad karma or be bad beings. But as you go up through the heavenly realms, they'll be hopefully nicer and nicer.
Oh, hopefully. And then when you reach enlightenment, you just don't have to deal with any of this anymore.
Yeah, you're out of the system.
Right. It's like losing your social insurance number or something like that. You just go off the grid, like John Connor. Sorry, I always have to bring something back to pop culture. All right, last question then as we're wrapping up. When a person is reborn, or when a soul or a being is reborn, are there only a set number of, for this argument, let's use the word soul. Are there only a set number of souls? Are souls being created? Like, assuming someone reaches enlightenment, their soul is taken out of the cycle. So are there only a limited set number of souls in the reincarnation rebirth cycle?
Well, as I mentioned, in Theravada Buddhism, there isn't a soul that gets reborn. So the analogy would be like a candle going out.
Okay.
The fire doesn't go anywhere. I mean, it just stops being. It's a valid question of whether that's a goal that somebody would want to attain, and what is the nature of a being after they've become enlightened. But, even in Buddhism, this is a very tricky issue. As to the amount of beings, I really don't know if there's a finite amount of beings. If there's a being factory somewhere in the universe.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
Heavenly realms churning them out.
For sake of argument, let's say that all, 6 billion people on Earth reached enlightenment. Would that mean that there's now 6 billion fewer souls in the cycle of rebirth and reincarnation?
Yeah, I don't know. My own teacher actually told me that for ordinary human beings, when they die, they split into 4.
Wow.
So he says that they're multiplying. But that's not a teaching I ever found anywhere else in Buddhism. But I mean, who knows? We want to draw a distinction. In Christianity, there's a lot of discussion about what you believe, and that's very important. And in Buddhism, what you believe, I mean, like, who are you? You don't know about heaven and hell. We don't know how karma works. We don't know if there really are rebirth or anything. So what we can talk about is what the teaching says. Okay. That we can state, I can state the sutta says this.
Right.
How it works, whether it's exactly true, whether there's a being factory somewhere in the world, I mean, who knows? We can only speculate.
Okay.
But your belief in Buddhist terms isn't that important. The idea is that if it's true, whether you believe it or not. Before Australia was discovered, you may believe in Australia or not, but your belief is irrelevant to whether it's true.
Yeah, it's always refreshing to talk to someone about theology and have them say, I don't know. Who knows? No one can know.
Where do you think you're destined for rebirth?
Where?
Yeah. Oh, another thing to finish off, according to the teaching in Theravada Buddhism, if you make a clear determination of where you want to be reborn, and you have the necessary virtuous karma to back that up, you can actually divert yourself into that place. So you can actually choose to be male or female if you have the virtues to pull it off. And you can also determine the place that you're with, or
like
the people.
The level of hell or heaven or the realm.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the necessary virtues. So I think that I was a Thai in a previous lifetime, and I'd looked at England and thought England was fantastic, and I want to be reborn in England. And having been reborn in England through the 1980s of Margaret Thatcher's Britain, I now have decided I want to come back to Thailand. So you can have some degree, if your karma is there, to choose, and also the people that you're surrounded with. So you can get reborn around the same people, lifetime after lifetime. This is a common New Age teaching, that you get reborn with the same people over and over.
Okay, well, Let me state now for the record that I want to be reborn around the same time, because I really want to watch Breaking Bad again, and I don't have enough time right now, so I can give it a go in my second round. All right, Phra Pandit, thank you very much for coming on the show and talking about this. As always, cool. I leave with a full heart and a fuller brain.
Cool.
You know, this is so good for me to hear this, because as a Westerner who got interested in Buddhism a long time ago, and as someone who has to teach philosophy, including Buddhism, to Thai students, I think from my perspective, I want Buddhism to be kind of less supernatural. And a lot of Western Buddhists, it's like they like the core concepts in Buddhism because they're not so supernatural, you know. But then when you hear this type of stuff, you realize that that's not really, you know, if you come to Asia and you interact with Asian Buddhists, like real Buddhists, you'll find that there's just as much supernatural stuff in it as Western religion.
Yeah, I imagine a lot of that's been added in the centuries since. But you know, it's the old argument: is Buddhism a philosophy or is it a religion?
Yeah, it's weird. I think in the West we want to make it a philosophy, and we want to think of it as something that is not supernatural. But the simple truth is that's just not how most Asian Buddhists look at it. I mean, who knows? I mean, you know, that's a different debate about what the original Buddha said. Who knows? You know, but it is kind of fascinating that Westerners want Buddhism to be kind of like more scientific and less supernatural. But in general, Thai Buddhists, they don't look at it that way, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's huge belief in the magic of amulets and the power of amulets, and
that's right. It's very super. You know,
it's not that different from any other major religion.
Yeah, it's very superstitious and very supernatural. That's just a fact on the ground. So it's good to hear these explanations like this from an actual Buddhist monk in Thailand.
Yeah, he's about as legit as they get. He's too legit to quit.
No doubt about that.
I probably committed some kind of blasphemy there, but it's okay.
That's right.
I'll just ask for forgiveness. That's how it works, right? Okay, well, normally we do love, loathe, or live with, but we're going to do something a little bit different this week. We're going to go to our newest segment, which we call simply voicemail. So we ask our listeners to send us a voicemail on the Line app if they have something to say. And this week we heard from our buddy Jason.
Excellent.
I can't remember when I first checked out the Bangkok podcast, but I remember coming across it and listening to it and thinking that this is a couple of guys. I don't know if it's Ed and Greg or if it was the older presenters. And I was thinking this is just a couple of so-called knowledgeable sexpats living in Bangkok. Because after all, let's face it, they all seem to know everything about Thailand. But upon further listening, and especially at the early 2019, actually when I was in Bangkok, one of my many visits to Asia, and listening to the podcast, and I thought these guys are really good, and they're the opposite of what I thought. Ed and Greg are fascinating shows, funny, insightful. So I think it was early last year, 2019, I decided to subscribe, or rather become a patron and support what they do. And in fact, just to add to that, sometimes the bonus shows are just as good or better than the main show, and I look forward to them every time they come the notification comes in my inbox. Anyway, thanks guys. Thanks for keeping this, keeping us smiling in times, I'm in the UK at the moment, but in times of uncertainty in the world. And keep it up. All the best. Cheers, guys. See ya.
I got a feeling Jason has a very high IQ. It's just a feeling I have.
Yeah, I wonder why. Someone pays me slavish compliments and suddenly they're smart, well-educated, and
That's
smart.
right, yeah. I got a feeling Jason, he's just, he knows what he's talking about. He's got his shit together.
Seems like it.
All right. So as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we'd like to say thank you to Grant McKay for lending us his support at the show shout out level. And Greg, what did you find out about Grant?
Well, as it turns out, Grant is from Melbourne, Australia. We've got a lot of patrons from Australia. I think it is a
cool
continent of cultured individuals.
Clearly, obviously, with very good taste.
Much like our friend Jason.
Yes.
He says, now, Grant says he's married to a Thai girl and we plan on moving back to Thailand in the next year or two and live in Pink Lao. So he lives on the cool side of the river like you and I do.
For sure. Of course.
On the west side. Yeah. He said he stumbled across our podcast on Spotify and love your interesting content and the unique chemistry you guys have. It's refreshing to hear a podcast where the hosts don't always agree on everything.
Nice.
That's right. We agree on a lot of things, but
not Thai massage.
Not Thai massage. We did a whole show about that. Eventually it's going to work up to like, hey, this is the show where Ed and I arm wrestle.
That's right. I don't like that. I don't like that. That's not a good idea.
Super compelling audio content. Two guys standing there going. Anyway, Grant tells a funny story, and this is easy to relate to, Ed, because he said on his first trip to Thailand, he was in Bangkok and he was sitting on a foot bench at a park bench, and he noticed that all the Thais that were walking by him were stopping and whying him. And he was like, "Oh, this is great! Like this amazing culture."
They're so polite.
They're so polite. And then after a while, he turned around and he realized he was sitting in front of a Buddhist statue.
That's great. That's great.
He said, for a moment, I thought I was a celebrity.
Oh, that's great. I like it.
It's like the Thai version of, seeing a beautiful girl across a club or something and she waves at you and you wave back. And then there's like a super handsome, ripped guy standing behind you.
Right. Yeah, that's great. No, I love it.
My friend told me this story. It's definitely never happened to me.
No, never. Not you. I don't think that would ever happen to you.
But Grant says, keep up the great work, guys. I look forward to having a cold beer with you both in the future. My shout. Again, we can get behind that faux show.
Agreed.
Yeah. So thanks, Grant. That's really cool. And next time you're in Bangkok, just, do like a dog and do a 360 first before you sit down and see what's around you. Because you don't want to get caught up in anything like that again.
That's great. That's great. All right. A final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping support the show. Find out more by clicking support on our website and connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, you can also listen to each episode on YouTube, chat with us online, or even reach out to me directly on Twitter or Instagram, where I am BKK Greg. So thank you for listening, folks, and we'll see you back here next week.
For sure. Hello, hello, hello.
A one and a two and a two. A bottle of wine that dates back to when Constantine was emperor. It's crazy.
Damn.
It's doubly cool because I'm just listening to the History of Rome podcast right now. And I am right now listening to the part about Constantine.
Wow.
You know what he did? His son Crispus, his second wife convinced Constantine that her stepson, his son from his first marriage, was plotting to overthrow him because she wanted her own biological son to be in line for emperor.
Wow.
So he killed Crispus. Constantine killed him.
His son.
He killed his own son because he thought he was plotting to overthrow him. And then he found out that it was all fabricated by his new wife. So he had her thrown in jail for a while, and then he locked her in a steam room, turned up the heat, and let her die in the steam room.
Wow.
Tell you, man.
Sounds like a real hero.
Yeah, good guy. Someone I want to know. Sure.